Marcus had always been a skeptic. At 28, he worked as a data analyst for a tech company in Seattle, spending his days buried in spreadsheets and algorithms. Numbers were his language, but they were cold, logical things, nothing mystical about them. That's why what happened next seemed so impossible. It started on a Tuesday morning in October. Marcus woke up at exactly 7:07 a.m., which wasn't unusual since his alarm was set for 7 o'clock. But when he reached for his phone to turn off the snooze, the battery showed 77%. He shrugged it off, got dressed, and headed to the kitchen for breakfast. The coffee maker's digital display read 7:77, which should have been impossible since time doesn't work that way. Marcus blinked hard and looked again. 7:17. Must have been the morning grogginess playing tricks on his eyes. He poured his coffee and grabbed a banana, checking the price sticker out of habit, 77 cents. On the bus to work, Marcus sat in seat 7G. The route number was 777, something he'd never noticed before despite taking this same bus for 3 years. He pulled out his phone to check emails, and noticed his battery was at 77% again. Hadn't it been at that exact percentage when he woke up? Phones usually drained overnight. The coincidences continued throughout the day. His employee ID badge, which he'd had for years, suddenly seemed to catch his attention. EM 777. The timestamp on his first email of the day, 7:77 a.m. No wait, that was impossible again. He refreshed his screen. 7:17 a.m. His eyes were definitely playing tricks on him. During lunch, Marcus decided to grab a sandwich from the deli across the street. The total came to $7.77. The cashier, an elderly woman with kind eyes, smiled as she handed him his change. 777, she said softly. Angel number. They're trying to tell you something. Excuse me? Marcus asked, confused. The angels. When you keep seeing 777, it means you're on the right spiritual path. Great things are coming. She winked and turned to the next customer. Marcus walked back to his office building, sandwich in hand, mulling over the woman's words. Angel numbers. He'd heard of numerology but never paid it much attention. Still, the frequency of these sevens was getting weird. That evening, Marcus decided to look up 777 meaning on his laptop. What he found made him uncomfortable, in a way he couldn't explain. Site after site described 777 as a powerful spiritual number, associated with divine guidance, inner wisdom, and spiritual awakening. Some sources claimed it was a message from guardian angels. Others said it indicated that major life changes were coming. According to numerology websites, seeing 777 repeatedly meant the universe was trying to communicate something important. It supposedly indicated that the person was ready to receive spiritual insights and should trust their intuition. Some interpretations suggested it was a sign of good fortune, while others focused on spiritual enlightenment and the development of psychic abilities. Marcus closed his laptop, feeling ridiculous. He was a man of science and logic. Numbers were tools for analysis, not mystical messages from the cosmos. But as he got ready for bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. The digital clock read 11:07 when he finally turned off the lights. He woke up again at exactly 7:07 a.m. Over the next few days, the pattern intensified. Marcus began keeping a note on his phone every time he encountered the number 7 or multiples of it. The list grew alarmingly long. Bus seat 14, 7 plus 7. Coffee shop receipt totaling $14.77. Stepping onto the elevator at floor 7. Parking spot number 77 at the grocery store. His odometer hit 77,777 miles on Thursday. He'd bought the car used and had never paid attention to the mileage milestones before. By Friday, Marcus was starting to feel paranoid. Was he unconsciously seeking out these numbers? Was his brain playing tricks on him, making him notice sevens more because he was thinking about them? He tried to rationalize it as confirmation bias. Once you start looking for something, you see it everywhere. But then things started happening that couldn't be explained by selective attention. On Saturday morning, Marcus decided to visit his sister Sarah, who lived about an hour outside the city. Sarah was everything. Marcus wasn't: artistic, spiritual, and deeply interested in what she called the mysteries of the universe. She read tarot cards, burned sage, and had crystals scattered throughout her cozy cottage. When Marcus told her about the 777 encounters, Sarah's eyes lit up. Marcus, this is incredible. You're receiving divine guidance. 777 is one of the most powerful angel numbers. It means you're about to experience a major spiritual breakthrough. Come on, Sarah. You know I don't believe in that stuff. That's exactly why this is so significant. The universe doesn't usually waste time sending messages to people who aren't ready to receive them. The fact that you're seeing 777 everywhere means you're being prepared for something big. Sarah pulled out one of her numerous books on numerology and flipped to a page about the number 777. She read aloud, 777 indicates that you have listened to divine guidance and are putting that wisdom to work in your life. You are on the right path and should continue moving forward with confidence. This number also suggests that you may be developing psychic or intuitive abilities. Marcus rolled his eyes, but something in his chest tightened. Psychic abilities? That's ridiculous. Is it? Think about it, Marcus. How many times in the past week have you had a gut feeling about something that turned out to be right? How many times have you thought about someone just before they called or texted you? Marcus was about to dismiss the question when he realized he couldn't. There had been several instances lately where he'd had strange intuitive hits. On Wednesday, he'd suddenly felt compelled to take a different route home from work, only to find out later that there had been a major accident on his usual route. On Thursday, he'd woken up with an inexplicable urge to call his old college roommate, Dave, whom he hadn't spoken to in months. When he finally gave in and made the call, Dave had answered by saying, "I was just thinking about you." "That's just coincidence," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe, or maybe you're finally opening up to possibilities you've been closed off to your entire adult life." Sarah closed the book and looked at her brother with a mixture of concern and excitement. "Marcus, what if this 777 thing is exactly what it appears to be? What if something or someone is trying to tell you something important?" Marcus spent the rest of the weekend at Sarah's, and the number appearances continued. The old grandfather clock in her living room chimed at 7:07, 7:17, 7:27, and so on throughout both days. Each time it chimed, Sarah would give Marcus a meaningful look. The local radio station they listened to while cooking dinner was 77.7 FM. When they decided to watch a movie, Sarah's streaming service recommended a film that was exactly 77 minutes long. On Sunday evening, as Marcus prepared to drive home, Sarah grabbed his arm. "Promise me something," she said. "Promise me you'll stay open to whatever's happening. Don't let your analytical mind shut down something that could be really important." Marcus nodded reluctantly and hugged his sister goodbye. The drive home took exactly 77 minutes, despite the fact that it usually took about an hour. That night, Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. What if Sarah was right? What if there really was something supernatural happening? He'd always prided himself on being rational, but rationality demanded that he consider all possibilities, even the ones that made him uncomfortable. He decided to conduct an experiment. If these 777 sightings were really some kind of divine communication, then maybe he could communicate back. It felt ridiculous, but he closed his eyes and spoke into the darkness of his bedroom. "Okay, if you're real, angels, universe, whatever, give me a sign. Something I can't explain away as coincidence or confirmation bias, something undeniable." He felt foolish as soon as the words left his mouth, but he'd committed to the experiment. He closed his eyes and tried to quiet his analytical mind, something that didn't come naturally to him. He must have fallen asleep, because the next thing he knew, he was waking up to his alarm, 7 a.m., as usual. But as he reached for his phone to turn off the alarm, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. His phone showed 77 missed calls from the same number. All of them had come in at exactly 7:07 a.m. according to the call log. But that was impossible. His alarm had gone off at 7 o'clock and he'd woken up immediately. He couldn't have missed 77 calls in 7 minutes, especially since his phone was right next to his head and would have been ringing constantly. Marcus checked the number that had supposedly called him 77 times. It wasn't a number he recognized, and when he tried to call it back, he got a message saying the number was not in service. His hands were shaking as he got ready for work. This couldn't be explained by confirmation bias or selective attention. Either his phone was malfunctioning in a very specific and bizarre way, or something genuinely supernatural was happening. The commute to work was surreal. Every digital display he encountered showed some variation of 7. The bus arrival time 7 minutes, his coffee order number 77. The floor display in his office building elevator, which stopped at floor 7, even though he'd pressed 12, and no one had gotten off. When he finally reached his desk, Marcus found a note from his supervisor asking him to report to conference room 777B. Room 777B didn't exist. Marcus had worked in this building for 3 years and knew every conference room. The highest room number was in the 500S. But when he asked the receptionist about it, she gave him directions as if it were perfectly normal. Down the hall, past the water cooler, take a left at the 7-Eleven promotional poster, and it's the 7th door on your right, she said, without looking up from her computer. There was no 7-Eleven poster in their office building. Marcus walked down the hall anyway, feeling like he was in a dream. Sure enough, there was a 7-Eleven promotional poster he'd never seen before, and when he turned left, there was a hallway he was certain hadn't been there the previous week. The 7th door on the right bore a placard that read 777B. Marcus stood in front of the door for several minutes, his heart pounding. This was impossible. Conference rooms didn't just materialize overnight. Hallways didn't appear out of nowhere, but there it was, solid and real, complete with the same corporate carpeting and fluorescent lighting as the rest of the building. He knocked on the door. "Come in," said a voice he didn't recognize. Marcus opened the door and stepped into a conference room that looked exactly like all the others in the building, except for one detail. There were 7 people sitting around the table, all looking at him expectantly. He didn't recognize any of them, which was strange because he knew everyone who worked on his floor. "Marcus," said the woman at the head of the table. She appeared to be in her 50s, with silver hair and the most piercing blue eyes he'd ever seen. "Please, have a seat." Marcus sat down in the only empty chair, which was directly across from the woman. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some mistake. I got a note saying my supervisor wanted to see me in this room, but I don't know who any of you are." "There's no mistake," the woman said softly. "We've been waiting for you." The 6 other people around the table nodded in unison. Marcus noticed that they were all different ages and ethnicities, but they all had the same intense knowing look in their eyes. "Waiting for me? I don't understand." "Marcus, you've been receiving our messages for the past week. The 777S. We've been trying to get your attention because we need your help." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. "Who are you?" "We're what you might call guardians. We exist in the spaces between what you consider reality. We're responsible for guiding certain individuals toward their spiritual destiny when the time is right." "This is crazy," Marcus said, starting to stand up. "I'm hallucinating, or having some kind of breakdown." "Sit down, Marcus." The woman's voice was gentle but firm. "Look at your phone." Marcus looked down at his phone. The time showed 7:07, and it had been 7:07 for the past several minutes. The seconds weren't advancing. "Time works differently when we're involved," explained a younger man with dark hair. "We exist partially outside of your normal temporal experience." "You're not having a breakdown," added an elderly man with a kind face. "You're experiencing what happens when someone with latent spiritual abilities is ready to awaken." The 777 appearances weren't coincidences. They were breadcrumbs, leading you to us. Marcus sank back into his chair. "Spiritual abilities? I don't have any spiritual abilities." "Everyone has them," said a middle-aged woman with red hair. "But most people suppress them in favor of rational, logical thinking. You've been suppressing yours for years, but recent events in your life have weakened those mental barriers." "What recent events?" The silver-haired woman smiled sadly. "Your father's death 6 months ago." Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. His father had died of a heart attack in April, and Marcus had been devastated. He'd always been close to his father, who had been an engineer like Marcus, logical, practical, and skeptical of anything that couldn't be measured or proven. "How do you know about my father?" "We know about all our potential recruits," the woman said. "Your father's death opened you up emotionally in ways you haven't experienced since childhood. Grief has a way of dissolving the barriers between the rational mind and the intuitive soul." Marcus realized he was crying and wiped his eyes quickly. "Recruits for what?" "There are people in this world who are in danger," explained the dark-haired man. "Not physical danger, but spiritual danger. They're about to make decisions or take actions that will lead them away from their true purpose, sometimes with devastating consequences. Our job is to intervene, subtly, carefully, to guide them back onto the right path. We do this through signs, synchronicities, and intuitive nudges, added the red-haired woman. But it requires people who can bridge the gap between the spiritual realm and the physical world. People who are logical enough to function in normal society, but intuitive enough to receive and interpret divine guidance. You want me to become some kind of spiritual intervention agent? Marcus asked, incredulous. We want you to become who you were meant to be, the silver-haired woman said. Marcus, you've always had the ability to sense things others can't. You've just been taught to ignore those sensations. Marcus thought about the strange intuitive hits he'd been having lately, the sudden urges that had turned out to be correct, the feeling that he could sometimes sense what people were thinking or feeling before they expressed it. How does this work, exactly? We assign you to individuals who are at critical junctures in their lives, explained the elderly man. You receive guidance about how to cross their paths in ways that seem natural and coincidental. A conversation on a bus, a chance meeting in a coffee shop, sometimes just being in the right place at the right time to prevent an accident or witness something important. And these people never know they're being helped? The best spiritual intervention is invisible, said the dark-haired man. People have to believe they're making their own choices. We just provide the right circumstances for them to make better choices. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, processing what he'd heard. Part of him wanted to run out of the room and never look back, but another part, a part he'd been ignoring for years, was intrigued. What if I say no? Then you say no, the silver-haired woman replied. We never force anyone. The 777 messages will stop, and you'll go back to your normal life. But Marcus, I think you know that your normal life isn't satisfying you anymore. You've been feeling empty, like something's missing. Your father's death made you realize that there has to be more to existence than just work and routine. She was right. And Marcus hated that she was right. Since his father's death, he'd been going through the motions of his daily life, but nothing felt meaningful. He'd started questioning what he was really accomplishing, what legacy he was leaving, whether there was any point to any of it. If I agree to this, what happens to my job? My normal life? You keep your job, said the red-haired woman. This isn't about abandoning your regular life. It's about adding a deeper layer of purpose to it. Most of our interventions happen during your normal daily activities. You might get a sudden urge to take a different route to work, or to stop for coffee at a different place, or to strike up a conversation with a stranger. Small actions that seem insignificant but create ripple effects. How do I know when I'm supposed to do something? The same way you've been noticing the 777s, said the elderly man. You'll develop an internal guidance system, a sense of knowing when something is important. It takes practice, but you already have the foundation. Marcus looked around the room at the 7 faces watching him expectantly. Everything logical in his mind was screaming at him to walk away, to dismiss this as an elaborate delusion or breakdown. But something deeper, something he'd been ignoring for years, was telling him this was the most real thing that had ever happened to him. What's my first assignment? He asked. The silver-haired woman smiled. There's a woman named Elena Vasquez. She's 24 years old, works as a nurse at Seattle General Hospital. She's been dealing with severe depression since her divorce 6 months ago, and she's planning to end her life tonight. Marcus felt his chest tighten. How do you know this? We know because we're supposed to know, she said simply. Elena is meant to become a pediatric surgeon. She's going to save hundreds of children's lives over the next 30 years. But first, she needs to be reminded that her life has value and purpose. What am I supposed to do? You're going to be in the right place at the right time, said the dark-haired man. Elena plans to jump off the Aurora Bridge tonight at 11:07. You're going to be walking across that bridge at exactly that moment. Walking across the Aurora Bridge? I never walk across the Aurora Bridge. I don't even like heights. You will tonight, said the red-haired woman. You'll suddenly get the urge to take a walk, even though it's going to be cold and rainy. You'll feel compelled to go to that specific bridge, though you won't understand why. And then what? Then you trust your instincts, said the silver-haired woman. You'll know what to say and do in the moment. That's how this works. We put you in position, and your intuitive abilities handle the rest. Marcus felt overwhelmed. This is a huge responsibility. What if I mess it up? What if I say the wrong thing and make it worse? You won't, the elderly man said with quiet confidence. We chose you because you have the right combination of empathy, intelligence, and spiritual sensitivity. Trust the process, Marcus. Trust yourself. The woman at the head of the table stood up. It's time for you to go back to your regular day. Tonight, at around 10:30, you'll start feeling restless. You'll want to go for a walk. Despite the weather, follow that impulse. Marcus stood up, his legs feeling unsteady. How do I contact you afterward? How do I know if I did the right thing? You'll know, she said, and we'll be in touch when it's time for your next assignment. Marcus walked toward the door, then turned back. I don't even know your names. Names aren't important in this work, the silver-haired woman said. What's important is the work itself. Marcus opened the door and stepped back into the hallway. He turned around immediately to ask another question, but the door was gone. The hallway ended at a blank wall, as if room 777B had never existed. He spent the rest of the workday in a daze, mechanically completing his tasks while his mind reeled. Had that really happened? Was he losing his mind? Every rational instinct told him he was experiencing some kind of psychological break, but the memory of the meeting felt more real than anything else in his life. At 5 p.m., Marcus left work and went home to his apartment. He tried to act normal, made dinner, watched the news, read emails, but he couldn't concentrate on anything. The clock seemed to be moving impossibly slowly, and he found himself checking it every few minutes. 10:15 p.m., nothing. 10:20 p.m., still nothing. 10:25 p.m., Marcus felt fine, completely normal. Maybe the whole thing had been a delusion after all. 10:30 p.m. Suddenly Marcus felt like the walls of his apartment were closing in on him. He needed air, he needed to move, he needed to walk, despite the fact that it was starting to rain and he hated walking in the rain. Without really making a conscious decision, Marcus grabbed his jacket and left his apartment. He walked to his car, then stopped. He didn't want to drive anywhere. He wanted to walk. Specifically, he wanted to walk north, toward the bridge. The Aurora Bridge. His feet carried him through the city streets, past closed shops and late-night restaurants, past bus stops and parking meters. The rain was getting heavier, but Marcus barely noticed. He felt like he was being pulled by an invisible string, guided by something beyond his conscious will. As he approached the bridge, Marcus checked his phone. 10:58 p.m. His heart started pounding as he realized he was about to find out whether the morning's meeting had been real or imaginary. The Aurora Bridge stretched out ahead of him, its lights reflecting off the wet pavement. There were a few cars crossing, but no other pedestrians visible. Marcus walked onto the bridge, his footsteps echoing in the night air. 11:05 p.m. Marcus was about halfway across the bridge when he saw her, a young woman with dark hair, wearing scrubs under a thin jacket, standing at the railing and looking down at the water far below. She was exactly where the people in the conference room had said she would be. Elena. Marcus approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. As he got closer, he could see that she was crying, her hands gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles were white. "Excuse me," Marcus said softly, when he was about 10 feet away. "Are you okay?" Elena turned toward him and Marcus saw a face that was both beautiful and devastated. Her eyes were red from crying, and there was a hollowness in them that made his heart ache. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then looked back at the water. "You should keep walking." Marcus felt a surge of intuition, stronger than anything he'd experienced before. Words came to him that he hadn't planned, wisdom that seemed to come from somewhere outside himself. "You know, I lost someone 6 months ago too," he said, moving a little closer. "My father, heart attack. I kept thinking that if I had just called him that day, or visited more often, or pushed him to go to the doctor sooner, maybe things would have been different." Elena looked at him again, this time with more attention. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. The thing is, for months I felt like I was responsible for his death, like I had failed him somehow. But then I realized something. He lived his life the way he wanted to live it. He made his own choices, good and bad. And the love we shared, that was real, and it mattered, and it doesn't disappear just because he's gone." Elena was crying harder now. "You don't understand. I couldn't save my marriage. I can't save my patients. I can't even save myself. What do you do for work? Marcus asked, even though he already knew. I'm a nurse. Pediatric unit at Seattle General. So you work with sick children? Yeah. And I watch them suffer, and I watch their parents suffer, and half the time there's nothing I can do to help them. I got into nursing because I wanted to make a difference, but I'm just useless. Marcus felt another surge of intuitive knowing. Elena, can I tell you something? And I know this is going to sound strange, coming from a complete stranger, but I have a feeling you need to hear it. She nodded, wiping her eyes. You're not useless. You're going to become a pediatric surgeon. I know that probably sounds impossible right now, but you have healing hands and a healing heart. You're going to save hundreds of children's lives over the next 30 years. Kids who wouldn't have lived without your skill and your compassion. Elena stared at him. How could you possibly know that? You don't even know me. Marcus realized he had no rational explanation for his certainty, but the words kept coming. I know it because sometimes the universe sends us messages through other people. I know it because you're standing here in the rain at 11 p.m., wearing scrubs, which means you just finished a shift taking care of sick kids. Someone who was truly useless wouldn't be working late to help children. Someone who didn't have a healing soul wouldn't be drawn to that kind of work in the first place. But I feel so empty inside. So hopeless. That's grief, Marcus said. It's not permanent, even though it feels like it is. The emptiness you're feeling, it's not because your life lacks purpose, it's because you've been hurt, and hurt people sometimes lose sight of their own value. Elena was quiet for several minutes, still gripping the railing but no longer looking down at the water. I was going to jump, she said finally. I know. Why did you stop me? Marcus considered how to answer that question. He could tell her about the meeting in room 777B, about the spiritual guardians, about being guided to this exact spot at this exact time, but he sensed that wasn't what she needed to hear. Because 30 years from now, there are children who need you to be alive, parents who need you to save their kids, a world that needs your particular combination of skills and compassion. And because 6 months from now you're going to wake up one day and remember what it feels like to have hope. How can you be so sure? Because I've been where you are. Maybe not exactly, but close enough. After my father died, I felt like nothing mattered anymore. Like I was just going through the motions of being alive without any real purpose. But tonight, talking to you, I feel more alive and purposeful than I have in months. Sometimes we find our meaning by helping other people find theirs. Elena finally let go of the railing and turned to face Marcus fully. What's your name? Marcus. I'm Elena. I know, Marcus smiled. Elena, will you let me call you a cab? Or is there someone I can call to come pick you up? My sister lives in Ballard, but it's really late. I bet she wouldn't mind. Elena pulled out her phone and made the call. Her sister was indeed more than willing to come get her, especially when Elena explained she was having a bad night and needed company. While they waited for Elena's sister to arrive, Marcus and Elena talked about their lives, their losses, their hopes. Marcus found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, his feelings of purposelessness since his father's death, his sense that there should be more to life than just work and routine. You know what's funny? Elena said as they saw headlights approaching. I almost didn't go to work today. I was feeling so depressed I could barely get out of bed. But then I thought about the kids in my unit, and I knew they needed me to show up. If I hadn't gone to work, I wouldn't have been walking home across this bridge at this time. And I almost stayed home tonight, Marcus replied. I was perfectly content watching TV, but then I suddenly felt like I needed to take a walk, even though it was raining. It's like we were supposed to meet. Marcus smiled. Yeah, I think we were. Elena's sister arrived. A woman who looked like an older version of Elena, with the same kind eyes and gentle demeanor. As Elena got into the passenger seat, she rolled down the window. Marcus, thank you. I mean it. You saved my life tonight. You saved mine too, Marcus said, and realized it was true. As the car drove away, Marcus stood on the bridge for a few more minutes, processing what had just happened. Had he really just prevented a suicide? Had he actually fulfilled some kind of spiritual mission? The whole thing still felt surreal, but there was no denying the reality of Elena's tears, her pain and her gradual movement away from despair toward hope. Marcus walked home through the rain, feeling more awake and alive than he had in years. When he got back to his apartment, he looked at his phone. 12:07 a.m. The next day had already begun. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself paying attention to subtle impulses and intuitive nudges in ways he never had before. He started taking different routes to work based on sudden hunches. He struck up conversations with strangers when he felt prompted to do so. He began to notice synchronicities and coincidences with much greater frequency. The 777 sightings continued, but they felt different now, less urgent, more like friendly reminders that he was on the right path. Marcus began to understand that they appeared most frequently when he was about to receive guidance about helping someone. 3 weeks after the bridge encounter, Marcus was buying coffee when he noticed the barista seemed upset. Her name tag read Amy, and she had the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept in days. Marcus felt a familiar internal nudge and decided to trust it. Instead of just ordering his usual coffee, he asked, "Are you okay? You seem like you're having a rough day." Amy's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep it together at work. But my mom's in the hospital. She's been fighting cancer for 2 years, and the doctors are saying there's nothing more they can do. I don't know how I'm going to handle losing her." Marcus felt that same surge of intuitive knowing he'd experienced with Elena. "Amy, can I ask what kind of cancer your mom has?" "Pancreatic. Stage 4. They're talking about hospice care." "What hospital is she at?" "Seattle General." Marcus had a sudden clear vision of Elena in surgical scrubs, though he couldn't understand why. "Amy, I want you to ask the doctors about getting a consultation with Dr. Elena Vasquez in the surgical department. She specializes in complex cases that other doctors might consider inoperable." Amy looked confused. "I've never heard of Dr. Vasquez. Are you sure she works there?" Marcus paused, realizing he had no logical reason to know that Elena had become Dr. Vasquez, or that she worked in surgery, but the certainty was absolute. "She's new to the surgical department. Trust me on this. Ask specifically for Elena Vasquez." 2 months later, Marcus was back at the same coffee shop when Amy practically launched herself over the counter to hug him. "Marcus, oh my God, I can't believe you're here. I've been hoping I'd see you again. How's your mom?" "She's alive. Dr. Vasquez performed an experimental procedure that removed most of the tumor. Mom's still got a long recovery ahead, but the doctors are cautiously optimistic. Dr. Vasquez said she'd never attempted that particular technique before, but she had a strong intuition that it would work." Marcus smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. "That's incredible news. The weird thing is, when I first asked about Dr. Vasquez, the nurses said they'd never heard of her, but then the next day, she was there, like she'd just appeared out of nowhere. She said she'd recently transferred to the surgical department from nursing." After leaving the coffee shop, Marcus found himself walking past Seattle General Hospital. On impulse, he went inside and asked at the information desk about Dr. Elena Vasquez. "Dr. Vasquez? Oh yes, she's one of our rising stars in the pediatric surgery department. Very talented, very dedicated. Would you like me to see if she's available?" 10 minutes later, Elena appeared in the lobby, now wearing a white coat instead of scrubs. She looked confident, purposeful, and genuinely happy to see him. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood, and thought I'd see how you're doing." "I'm doing great. Really great. You know, the strangest thing happened after that night on the bridge. I went back to work the next day, and Dr. Henderson, the chief of surgery, pulled me aside. He said he'd been watching my work with the pediatric patients and wanted to know if I'd ever considered medical school. He offered to recommend me for an accelerated program for experienced nurses." "And you said yes?" "I said yes. I'm finishing my surgical residency next month, and then I'll be a full attending physician." It's like everything just fell into place after that night, like doors started opening that I didn't even know existed. They talked for another hour, with Elena sharing stories about her recent cases and her growing confidence as a surgeon. As Marcus prepared to leave, Elena grabbed his arm. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. That night on the bridge, you knew things about me that you couldn't possibly have known. You knew my name before I told you. You knew I was going to become a surgeon. How did you know those things?" Marcus considered how to answer. Sometimes people come into our lives at exactly the right moment with exactly the right words, for reasons we might never fully understand. Maybe that's just how the universe works. Elena studied his face. Are you some kind of guardian angel? Marcus laughed. I'm just a guy who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Well, guardian angel or not, you changed everything for me, and not just for me, for all the patients I've been able to help since then. There's a 7-year-old girl named Sophie, who's alive right now, because you stopped me from jumping